Welcome back to the Behind Their Business podcast, or welcome to the show if this is your first time listening. We are going to be talking with a really amazing guest today. All of the guests are amazing, but this is going to be a very good interview. She's going to be talking about the challenges that come with running a business as a woman of color while breaking cultural traditions. She's also going to talk a little bit about managing your business with a chronic illness, because I know many of the listeners are dealing with chronic illnesses as well. So I think it's really helpful to hear from other people, hear different perspectives, people going through the same thing. And in her business, she is a PR coach and publicist who focuses on helping creative entrepreneurs fulfill their full potential to become global industry leaders, which I love. So please welcome to the show, Lilian Sue. Lilian, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. I'm happy to be here.
You are so welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. So let's take a step back, and can you just share some more about your background and what led you to start your business?
Sure. Yeah, I am a first generation Chinese born Canadian, and I started my entrepreneurship journey actually sort of accidentally. What happened was I was in the middle of my university degree and I was doing a work experience program. And I said, okay, here's the thing. No one's going to hire me if they don't know what I can do. So from there, I started just trying to find opportunities to build my portfolio. I started out on the copywriting and social media side in the mid 2000s, trying to build my portfolio and get experience. And from there, it just kind of led to me running my business because I wanted to build that experience to continue to get more projects. And I got started in publicity because I had a lot of clients coming to me and asking me, hey, do you offer that as a service? And I got tired of telling people no. So I started doing that, and it gradually also transitioned into the PR coaching side because a lot of the folks that were interested in PR would come to me and say, I would love to hire you to do a campaign for me, but I can't afford it. So I looked at it and I'm like, there has to be a better way to reach these amazing entrepreneurs than just me simply being a service provider. So how do I bridge that gap? And I said, well, let's look at education. I've been in this line of work for a long time now. I've been in business for myself for almost 15 years. And how do I go about educating people? And coaching came about as a middle ground between having myself do the campaigns for them versus them taking my course, which I also have. And coaching is the more like personalized, hands-on. I'm on there with them on calls, helping them brainstorm things, giving them resources that'll help them answer questions on like, hey, I'm stuck on what to put in my media kit, or I'm spending time trying to find the right media to contact and I'm not getting anywhere. Can you help me out of that rut? So it's really blossomed into this incredible business where I feel like at every step of the way, whether my clients want me to be more hands-on or they're looking for more personalized guidance, or they actually want an actual course to help them learn how to build the whole thing out, I'm with them every step of the way. And the greatest gift in my business is when I'm talking to a client and I see that light bulb moment and they go, oh, I've never thought of that before. Thanks for, bringing that to my attention, because I had no idea this even existed. And for me, that's the most rewarding thing, to help them realize what they're capable of doing, so long as they have the right strategy, and to also help them be able to bust past those mindset blocks that are keeping them from moving forward, keeping them from recognizing and realizing their full potentials because they believe that they don't have enough experience, they don't have enough knowledge, or their audience isn't big enough, right? I really work with them to kind of bust past that, to see that you are just as capable as anybody else. It's just a matter of owning that, embracing that, celebrating that, and allowing yourself to move forward with the confidence that, hey, I can build this and I can launch this.
I'm sitting over here shaking my head so furiously. If anybody's watching the video, you're like, I can't stop shaking my head because I fully agree with all of that. There's something really special when you shift from a service provider role into a mentorship coaching role, that like that light bulb moment that you mentioned. That's such a special moment, and watching it happen with all of your clients, it's I for me, and it sounds like for you too, it's the most fulfilling thing that I can experience. And I mean, that just shows that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? Which is
Mhm.
so incredible. And I actually have a PR background as well. I worked at a PR agency for 5 years in corporate, and I can just tell everybody listening right now, PR is not easy to do on your own. It is a lot of work. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, people tend to downplay how much work it is. They're like, oh, I'll just throw together a list of podcasts that I'm going to pitch myself onto. And then they just send a templated email off and just assume they're going to get on the show. When you and I both know it's much more than that. There's a lot more that goes into it, including the logistics, but also the mindset as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also the other thing I see a lot is a lot of people always say that, I don't qualify for it. I don't need it
Yes,
because I'm
yes,
not
yes, yes.
doing XYZ. And it's like, well, here's the thing. It can work for everybody. It's just a matter of how do you make that work and figuring out ways to do that, because not everybody who launches a PR campaign is a major celebrity, number one. And number two, what I also see is that like people are like, oh, I don't need one unless I'm launching something, or if I'm not doing anything interesting, I don't need one. And it's like, well, the crux of public relations is to not sit there until you have something interesting. It's how do I make what I'm already doing sound interesting and compelling enough for somebody to go, hey, I'd love to interview you, or hey, we'd love to have you, present a seminar or whatever it is, right? So that's really the key. I find that a lot of people still have trouble sort of wrapping their heads around.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I can't tell you how many clients have said the same thing to me. They're like, well, I don't think I'm ready to be on XYZ podcast. Why not? Just do it. You have everything that you need right now. Okay, I do want to dive into the topic just a little bit. So I want to start with the cultural traditions part of this discussion. And I would love for you to start by sharing everybody the culture that you are immersed in, and then also those traditions that you mentioned that you had broken, and how that kind of felt for you, and how you have, I guess, overcome any challenges along with that.
Sure. Yeah. As I mentioned before, I'm a first generation Chinese born Canadian. My parents are immigrants from Guangzhou, from southern China. And although they've been in Canada for a number of years, there is a very set way of looking at careers and how you make money. The framework that I grew up in and that they modeled for myself and my brother was that you go to the university, you get the degree, you get out and you get that one job that you will stay in for 20 to 30 years. You'll collect the pension, and that's it. In their minds, what mattered above everything else was financial stability. There was no thought in either of their minds about things like burnout, about, am I actually being challenged or happy doing this? How much vacation time am I getting? Am I being valued? Is my health being valued in terms of sick days and things like that? There was no discussion of any of that sort of thing. And that's how they lived their lives from before I was born to when they both retired. And so we didn't have any sort of entrepreneurship role model to look look up to at all. My brother also found himself, my older brother found himself pushed into that, because as a chiropractor in Seattle, he could only do so much working for other chiropractors. So he made the decision to buy his own practice. And it was through him that I really caught a glimpse, even though we're in very different fields, what it takes to really learn how to run a business, to manage things like, what happens when, your invoices aren't being filled when you need them filled. How do you manage overhead? How do you go about looking for credible help from people who have the same mindset as you? They are like-minded, they're willing to put in the work, and they understand where you're coming from. And I went through a lot of pitfalls, both of us have, because, my parents don't understand the entrepreneurship world. To them, we are giving up what seems like guaranteed stability to go out and do something else. Well, as luck would have it, when I started building my business, that was right around the time the recession hit too, when I was going through work experience in university and cutting my teeth that way. Everyone was tightening their bottom lines. Where they could have hired somebody full-time for marketing, they decided, hey, I'm just going to do it myself to save money. So from an external standpoint, I'm faced with services and companies and other agencies and everything. Everybody was tightening their belts and closing their doors. And it's like, how do I find these opportunities, right? How do I go about looking? And for me, the word that became really clear to me, particularly for the early days of my business, was tenacity. In the early days, to try and find projects, I was on the phone and emailing 40, 50 companies a day, just seeing who's out there, who can I network with and build relationships with, and understanding that doing this type of work is not overnight. It's about the long haul. It's about, hey, how do I build these relationships and continue to nurture these relationships as I look for more paying clients? And a lot of it really came down to, when I made the switch to change from a service provider to more of a coaching aspect. At that time, I was getting burned out. I wasn't enjoying just sort of waiting for people to realize that they needed PR, that they needed social media or whatever it is, and just sitting there, right? Because at that time, it's like, if we're talking about service, most people will automatically look at what the price tag is and not what the value is, where, what the process is, whether or not we truly gel together as a team. And that's how I see myself and my clients. We are a team working together towards the common goal to get your project and your brand up and off the ground. That's what we do. And when I was going through all of this and recognizing that, hey, I'm burnt out, I'm not doing what I need to do to present myself in the best way possible, I need to change that. And that was the other thing that I came to the realization about, is that, there was no talk about mindset and mental health in my household, particularly as it came to careers. Whatever happened, we were just taught to grin and bear it. You move past it, it's done, what have you, right? Just move on to the next thing. And the more I did that, the more I realized how damaging it was, because not only did I feel like I was stuck mentally and emotionally, I didn't feel like I had the tools, the skills, the resources, or the support on how to move forward the best way possible. I had sought out both mental health and career counseling to try and get a grasp of, where am I going? What am I doing? And I came to the realization that ultimately, while those two things are helpful, they are addressing the symptoms of the larger issue. They're not getting to the root cause. So, how do I get to the root cause? By working on my mindset. I've been working with my mindset coach for over a year, and she really helped me break through mental barriers I don't think I even knew I had. Because for so many years, I looked at my business as, okay, people outside, until they contact me, they don't need to know about me. They don't need to know who I am. What they need to know is the results I can get people. So the results that I can get my clients should be able to speak for themselves, should be able to stand on their own merit. And I managed my business for years that way. And did not get the growth that I wanted. Started burning out mentally, and was literally just, my mindset was all wrong. I was stressed out. I was honestly desperate, and not always cognizant about taking on the best projects because of that. And one of the things my mindset coach had me change my perspectives on was, wait a minute. Instead of just thinking people don't need to know more about you, what is the harm in putting yourself out there more, in getting out there and actually talking to people and letting them know more about what it is that you do and why you do it and how you do it? Because if you want, your clients to understand the mindset around PR, you can't very well do that if you don't have your own mindset in order. And when she said that, like, I had my own light bulb moment, because it's like, what am I afraid of when it comes to putting myself out there like that? What, like, people aren't going to respond, or that people are going to come to me and all they care about is the price tag of my services? If that's the case, then they're not the right people for me to work with as it is. And when I came to that realization, Stephanie, my whole outlook on business and my career and why I do what I just totally changed, because then it became a question of how, what can I do to bring the joy back into my business, bring the energy back into my business, which is also tied into the chronic illness piece, which we'll touch on. But what can I do to really embrace the positives of entrepreneurship instead of working myself to the bone? And we had a long discussion and major reframing of the question of control. And that came up quite a bit because control has been a running theme in my culture and in my family, right? Traditionally, they put you in this box, and you are supposed to go out there and work for 20 to 30 years, get that pension. You are supposed to be a homeowner. You are supposed to, have kids. You are supposed to do all of these things according to cultural tradition. And that includes doing certain jobs. For my parents, they always really pushed us towards working for the government. here it would be federally, so for the Canadian federal government, or provincially for the government in BC. And they pushed us towards that because that was my dad's route. And he did, 30 years, got a pension, retired. And for me, I wanted to figure out in my business, having grown up with that, having felt like I wasn't in control of how things were going, how do I take the control back into my business by relinquishing it? And that sounds really weird, but what I found myself doing a lot of, which also, played into my chronic illness flaring up, was that I worried constantly about how people would respond, where the money was coming from, whether or not I was, actually connecting with the right people. And then I took a step back in working with my mindset coach, and she went, how would it feel if you gave up worrying about that lack of control? What would that feel like? And so I tried it. I started putting stuff out there and not obsessively checking to see who responded to it and when. And you know what? People naturally started responding. They started engaging, they started asking me questions, booking appointments, and I made sure to let them know that, hey, if you need help, I'm here. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to get you through all of this. And it became so much more freeing because now I'm actually reaching the right people. So in relinquishing my obsessiveness over that lack of control, all of a sudden I have the freedom to control what I can. And now my motto on a daily basis is, if I've done everything to the best of my ability for today, that's a win. I'm good. I've had a great day. And, all of these, I
This
see
is
that
amazing.
you agree. Yeah.
You have been saying so many incredible things. So I'm just going to pause for a second so that we can chat about it, because I've just noticed so many parallels to our stories. The need for control. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. I can 100% relate to that, and so can so many of the listeners. But also, my mom was the same way as your parents. Like, she's been at the same company for 37 years, and she should retire by now, but she's still not retiring because of that security, that safety, right? So I can completely relate to all of that. And I also love how you were talking about, I have some notes here that I'm looking at, the subconscious barriers that have been like hiding in our minds that we don't even realize, and they're affecting our day to day, which is, and until you work through it, until you do that mindset work, it's almost impossible to even know where it's all coming from. I do have one question though. Once you made this switch, and I guess it's for you and your brother, technically, since you both are entrepreneurs, how did your parents react to that?
Well, they weren't happy, and there was a lot of headbutting, particularly in the early days. And it just became about, you don't have to like it, but hey, I'm not living under your roof anymore, and I'm not asking you for money. So that is a boundary for me. That is a boundary that, I don't cross with them. If they ask how work is going, I tell them it's fine. Outside of that, we just don't talk, because there's so many elements of that they don't relate to, that they don't understand the mindset piece, they don't understand the mental health piece, and they also don't necessarily equate what had been happening with my chronic illness with the mindset piece either.
I do want you to dive into that now as well, like how the chronic illness, how that flared up, and how you believe it started, if you don't mind sharing that, of course.
Sure, yeah. I first got diagnosed about 7.5, 8 years ago now. And that actually flared up as really, really bad heartburn, or at least I thought it was really bad heartburn. And at one point, and at that time, it wasn't like I was doing anything different in terms of what I was eating or how I was sleeping, but I was wedding planning at that time, and finances were definitely tight for us. So I started getting these flare ups where it hurt so bad that it felt like somebody was squeezing my rib cage.
Oh my
And
gosh, that's
and
awful.
when yeah, so the first time we had to go to the hospital, and like I got scans and everything else, and it came out that it's what's known as dyspepsia. And what can bring that on, among other things, in regards to diet and when you eat and everything, is stress and anxiety. So those are two really, really key things that I feel, or I used to feel quite regularly, in running my own business, which meant like my sleep was affected. I didn't feel like I had a ton of energy during the day when I was awake. And when things got really stressful, when I started to internalize things like, a not so great experience with a client, or, somebody randomly emails me and tries to get me to lower my prices, like things like that. The more of those types of things I started to internalize, the more flare-ups I would have. And usually what would happen is with the flare-ups is I'd be fine for most of the day. And then I could go to sleep maybe for a couple hours, and then 11:30, midnight, 1 a.m. hits, and I get hit with a really bad flare-up of the dyspepsia to the point where I'm losing hours of sleep.
And that's the
And
worst thing that you could be doing, right?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And like literally the next day I'm just a zombie because I can't function. And I've it's been controlled with, dietary supplements from my naturopathic doctor that I take on a regular basis. But most importantly, in changing my mindset the way I have. I mean, I used to get flare ups maybe once every other month. Now it's a couple times a year.
That's amazing.
So I mean, it's hasn't gone away completely, but it's much easier to control, because now even when I have stressful situations, I will turn on a meditation track or a hypnosis track that my mindset coach created for me, and put that on, and it reminds me of how to deal with these types of situations in a healthier way, which includes asking myself, did you want to like work with this person to begin with? Or in the case of a client, have you done everything to the best of your ability that you knew how to do at that time? If the answer to that first question is no, and the answer to the second question is yes, then why are you stressing? Because just let it go. And I've learned a lot more in the past couple years as well to do a better job of recognizing where other people are at too.
I
Because
think
in
once you start, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a
yeah,
second. I think once you start to do that inner work, do the mindset work, it just kind of naturally happens where you start to see things happening in other people as well. And you can support them on their journey that they will eventually be going down, because we all go down that journey, whether we want to or not. It eventually happens. But sorry, go ahead.
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the other part of it too that I'm much better at recognizing now is that in the old days, whatever happened would trigger me, and I would stew in it for hours, if not days, depending on how badly I had inflated the situation in my head. Now I look at something and I recognize, I'm like, oh, that triggered me. Okay, why did it trigger me? And can I just let that go? Because it's not that big of a deal in the scheme of things. And it makes it so much easier because now, something happens and I'm able to let it go within a few minutes, because I recognize where the other person's coming from or where they're at, and I recognize where I'm at and why I feel triggered. Whereas before, I would just step into it and be stewing for days, and lose sleep, have the illness flare up, and just not not enjoy life,
Mhm.
you know?
Oh, I can completely relate to that. I was very similar to you. I would lash out at my husband if we were having a conversation about something. If he said one thing that triggered me, I would lash out on him and it would be a days long argument for no reason. But now, like you said, I'm able to reassess. Like I could almost feel it coming and then it comes and I could just like look at it kind of from an outside perspective. I'm just kind of like looking at the thought and I'm like, huh, that's an interesting thought. Thank you for visiting me, but I choose not to think that anymore. And then, like you said, like figure out where it's coming from so that we can address that at the root. I think that's so important.
And it's just a much healthier way to live these days,
It
particularly
is.
what, with whatever we're going through with the pandemic and everything else. It's much more freeing. And to me, it helps me embrace joy so much more.
Yeah.
Like I'm not like as worried about finances anymore, or about, then what happens is when you let go of that concern, you're not picking up random people to work with who will only nickel and dime you and not care about building the relationship and everything, right? To me, I think I've become a lot smarter about working with the right people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny when you do detach, like you mentioned, it just comes to you, right? Just very magically, it just starts to come, which is so incredible. And this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share all of this. Is there anything that you that we didn't speak about that you wanted to just share before we wrap things up?
I think we did a good job of covering it, just in terms of, that headbutting against cultural traditions, and also how that led to indirectly dealing with the chronic illness as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of women who are also dealing with chronic illnesses, especially in the era that we're living in now. Multiple people have told me that they've noticed these starting to flare up in the past couple of years. So I'm really glad that we were able to speak about this. Also, the cultural traditions, because I know that's also something that um, people are dealing with, working through right now as well. So thank you so much for this conversation. I know it's going to be helpful for so many people. And if the listeners want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
I'm the most active on Instagram, so they can find me on Lilian Sue Copywriter PR, and I will definitely send you all of the links and everything as well.
Yeah, all of those will be in the show notes for very easy access. So thank you again for being here, Lillian. This was such a good conversation.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.